Season 2 of House of the Dragon has finished airing on HBO, and I know I'm a couple of days late to this review. I do apologize. I did have a bunch of other stuff going on, and it took me a minute to catch up with a couple of episodes. But now that I've seen it all, I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. And there are going to be some spoilers in this. You have been warned. There are a lot of things that I want to discuss in regards to how this season progresses and its eventual conclusion. And so without further ado, let's get into it. At the end of the last season, things were hitting a boiling point as Rhaenyra, played once again by Emma Darcy, lost her son, and because the Greens and the Blacks have been splitting apart, Alicent on the other side, played by Olivia Cooke, and her decision making has led to a lot of problems in the Seven Kingdoms. Alliances are being formed or ripped apart, sides are being chosen, and everything seems to be pointing to a devastating blowback which is going to cause a major fallout and kill thousands in the process. And of course there's dragons involved in the mix, so there will be dragon fire and blood to go with that. And that's about the gist of the second season. A lot of it goes into planning and strategizing. This is a season that is decidedly a lot slower than the first one. While the first one did really run through quite a bit and a lot was happening, and it constantly, had this riveting pace to it because there was a lot of action as well. There's not a lot of that in season 2. There is action. And when it's there, some of it is incredible and there's some really, really great stuff. But at the same time, there are a lot of times where you're just with characters and they just have a lot of conversations about what is going on in other parts of the realm and what to do with other things that are popping up. Like, hey, how do we deal with this situation? How do we deal with this situation? Why aren't you doing anything much? Why aren't you doing anything much? What are you even doing? Like, there's a lot of that which is brought up in this season. But that also makes for a riveting season in its own way, I think, for the most part, because it kind of harkens back to old school Game of Thrones. The idea of also doing a lot of storytelling without necessarily having to make it this thing where, you need an action sequence to always make it interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with just characters. And that is a thing that is in this season. And as a result of that, you also get some really great performances out of everybody involved. Like Emma Darcy, who once again is excellent as Rhaenyra. I thought they did a great job in the first season, and over here, I think there are scenes which are even better. And Rhaenyra, she's already going through a lot. There's already a lot of grief in the air. She's obviously just lost her child. She was supposed to get the throne. She hasn't. She's being considered the pretender. There's a lot of bad blood towards her right now. So she has to sort of win over the masses and others around the Seven Kingdoms in order to have a stake and at the throne and to be able to get a clear line at it once again. And so as a result of that, there's a lot of frustration and, near desperation that's building up. She's sending everybody across and saying, hey, can you try and get someone towards us? We need armies. We need dragon riders. We need to make this as workable as possible. We need to make this as workable as possible. And it's really, really well captured. But the same is on the other side with Alicent, played excellently once again by Olivia Cooke, who is dealing with the ramifications of her very hasty decisions in season 1. She decided that things were going to go a certain way when it came to who would ascend to the throne. She very much misinterpreted the story that Viserys was telling about the Song of Ice and Fire. And because of that, now what's happened is that the power structure that's in place not exactly living up to the way that she thought it would, or anybody did. It has led to a lot of rifts among people who are in King's Landing. There's a lot of doubt in the air. Not everybody is fully going along with this idea of Aegon as king, especially because people also seem to be thinking, but Viserys said Rhaenyra, right? And so that's also causing some turbulence around. And it leads to a lot of desperation and frustration from her side as well. I think the two characters, obviously, they make up such a foundational framework of everything that's happening in this entire story that these two performances are key to everything. And I think both of them are fantastic. On the other hand, Matt Smith, who plays Daemon Targaryen, he's having a very interesting story on this one. Or is he? This is a polarizing thing for a lot of people when it comes to season 2. A lot of time you spend with Daemon, he is at Harrenhal having a lot of crazy visions and hearing things and having these very trippy flashbacks that are, looking to things that he has done along the way and mistakes that he's made in life. And what essentially this boils down to is trying to find a purpose through all of it. It's like, what was the point of all this? And trying to sort of take it forward, but also understand the mistakes that were made in the process. And that is something that is a recurring aspect of season 2 in general. Every character, whether it's Rhaenyra, Alicent, Daemon, Aegon, Aemond, name it, they're all dealing with things that have become as bad as they are, and the things that led to that. And it's actually a really great moment when Rhaenys, played by Eve Best, is talking to Rhaenyra about it, and she says, look, it's easy to say that this was entirely started because your son was killed, but how do you know that? Because the thing about history is that at some point of time this story is going to be told, and there's going to be a lot of different starts to it. There are so many things that are variables that are snowballing into what has become this, inevitable situation, this war that is about to kick off. I think it's really, really great. Speaking of Eve Best, I think Rhaenys is really great. Her sacrifice really broke my heart. I mean, she was a fantastic character, and she definitely went out with a bang, and I don't mean that as a pun. She also went out in what might be my favorite episode of the season, which is season 2, episode 4. She was fantastic in that, and that entire episode, the last about 30 minutes or so, is this incredible battle sequence which really, really blew me away. It's one of the best I've seen, I think, in any Game of Thrones related media. That episode was fantastic, and it's easily the peak of the entire season. And it's the kind of thing that you see and immediately you're thinking to yourself, well, so the rest of the season is going to be on that level, right? Not quite in terms of the action, but I was extremely invested with it, and even though it had a slower pace about it, it just kept getting better and better for me. And it also answered a few questions along the way about exactly how these characters should be. And like I said, it is a very, setup kind of season. This is building to what's going to be in season 3. If anything, the season finale of season 2 is pretty much an extended setup to that storyline. Everything that happens in it, every single exchange, is just a tease for what's to come, whether it's a battle sequence, whether it's a character, the disagreement, or any decisions that are made. It's all going to be in the service of what comes after. But at the same time, they are effective setups, and I want to see where those stories will go, particularly as the season's about to conclude. We have this long conversation between Rhaenyra and Alicent. And this is the second time that they end up interacting in the season. The first time is in episode 3, where Rhaenyra goes over to King's Landing incognito and talks to Alicent about what's going on, and she realizes that she's made a mistake and misinterpreted the Song of Ice and Fire. And in the finale of this season, Alicent comes in incognito and is like, hey, this has to stop. But the problem is that especially in the world that these characters are inhabiting, things have already gotten so out of hand, and so many people have already died, and so much damage has already been done. Even with the blood and cheese incident in the very first episode, which is extremely horrible because, a little kid was killed, a son for a son sort of situation. And the entire thing just serves to show what a massive mess this has become. And I'm very excited to see how season 3 will play out as a result of that. That being said, everything that I've been talking about paradoxically also is things that I think could be improved. Some of the storylines, particularly everything with Daemon, eventually builds to something that I think could have been done in a much more streamlined way. It does seem like a little extra downtime is given to that, and it doesn't feel like it all sort of, makes sense until eventually towards the ending, which I guess is a storytelling thing. You eventually build to that big outcome, which is going to be the payoff of that story. But at the same time, it just feels like it could have been done in a slightly tighter way, especially when it came to how the show was paced in this particular season. It is very different from the previous season, and it's a very good exploration of certain things that are, again, very effective. But if I was to point out some glaring issues with this season, I would say most of it does come down to the structuring and pacing of it. It does feel like certain scenes drag on a bit more than they should. Some scenes don't get enough highlights. Some things are shortchanged. Some things don't get as expanded upon. So I just feel like there could have been a little bit more to that. I did, however, like something that came up towards in the second half of the season regarding who is worthy to be a dragon rider. And it becomes this entire conversation where Missaria, played by Sonoya Mizuno, is like, hey, there is a possibility that anyone who has Targaryen blood could potentially ride a dragon. And eventually it leads to this moment where everybody who has had, relations with Targaryens at some point in their lives and or in their familial tree is like, hey, I'm up to this. And it leads to some new dragon riders, which is incredibly impressive. And in that sense, Rhaenyra is able to build an army of dragons, one that scares Aemond, who is like, oh, I had Vhagar, the biggest dragon, but now I'm outnumbered. Now I think I'm no longer invincible. And that is also something that is handled quite nicely. Oh, I should mention, Aegon gets burned at one point, so he's out of the game for a bit right now. And while we're talking about performances, I'm gonna highlight one more, and that is Fabian Frankel, the guy who plays Sir Criston Cole. God bless this guy for playing the biggest asshole you've seen on television in a long ass time. But it's the guy obviously is not that asshole. Like in real life, he seems to be a lovely person. He's very nice in interviews and all that. But yeah, good job, buddy. It's one of those things, right? You got to play the most hated character for a second over there, so you can join the ranks of the Joffrey and all that. So overall, I did enjoy season 2 of House of the Dragon. I think it is a slight bit below season 1. I really like that one. I think this is very good, but not quite as good. I think it could have been a little more tightly paced and written and structured, but the emotional and slower beats that it has for some of those characters and the payoffs that it eventually leads to, some of it is really, really good, and I did really like that about it, and so I'm very excited to see what season 3 is going to do. I'm gonna give House of the Dragon season 2 a B+. I gave the first one an A-, this one is a B+, so just a little bit of a difference there. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. I hope you guys checked out House of the Dragon season 2 because I just spoiled a lot for you. And I hope you guys did, have a good time with it. If you didn't, let me know in the comments down below. Talk either way. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe and hope you guys enjoy the show.